Hi everyone, hope you're all okay. My name's Rosie. Today I'm going to be doing my January roundup and my December to be read list. I've somehow managed to read 8 books in January, so I'm going to keep it quite quick and I'm not going to go into too much detail about the books. The first book I read in 2014, and I can't believe it's 2014 already, is Ron Burgundy's Let Me Off at the Top, My Classy Life and Other Musings. This isn't kind of an autobiography in like the classical sense, partly because he's not real, but it is literally a selection of his random musings. There are some really funny parts, like his thoughts on what to do in a prison riot. There's this ongoing feud with his neighbour about a hedge trimmer, I think it is, and strange things like what breath women find attractive, and it kind of gives you recipes. But anyway, I had 2 issues really. One was that I didn't get half of what he was talking about, and I don't know if that's because I'm too young to know who the people are, whether it was intentionally supposed to be confusing or whether it missed the mark. And secondly, I don't feel that his humour translates quite as well into written word, because part of Ron Burgundy's humour is how ridiculous he pronounces things, how he says things completely wrong. It's never going to be something to take incredibly seriously anyway and hold against really high standards of other really good biographies, but it was a really enjoyable read, and parts of it had me literally crying with laughter, but some parts of it I struggled with, and I found myself wanting to skip ahead. I gave Ron Burgundy's Let Me Off at the Top 3 out of 5. Sorry, Ron. The next book I read was a book I received an advance copy of from NetGalley, and that was And We Stay by Jenny Hubbard, which came out, I think it was the 28th of January. It's out now anyway. The things that happened to the main character were absolutely awful, and you can't kind of comprehend how people would deal with it. But I mean, it's a situation that real people have been through, but it's so terrible. But it's not it's not a completely depressing or really sad, terrible book. It's kind of a bit about how she tries to get over what's happened to her, and I've read this and I finished it sometime at the start of January, and now in the start of February I still find myself thinking about it. It kind of, randomly pops into my head. So yeah, it's definitely left an impression on me, and it was a book that was told through a mixture of verse and poetry, so that was quite interesting and wasn't something I'd read before, so I didn't know what to expect, but I found myself quite enjoying it, especially towards the end when her poetry started to get better. I gave And We Stay by Jenny Hubbard 3 out of 5. The next book I read in January was one of the options for the Read and Ramble book club January choice, and that was The Silver Linings Playbook by Matthew Quick. This is a book I've been meaning to read for ages, really, since I saw the film advertised, because I wanted to read the book first. And I'm not going to go into too much detail because I have got a video review recorded for this, I just haven't got around to editing it yet. But I really enjoyed this, and from reading the description you might think that perhaps it's a bit of a sad or a depressing book that you might struggle with, but I really enjoyed it, and mostly because of Pat's outlook on life. Despite the things he's been through, nothing seems to really keep him down. He truly believes in silver linings, and I think it would be interesting if more people could adopt Pat's approach to things. He just seems to keep on going, and it's about his recovery and how he deals with the issues that put him in the mental health institute in the first place. But this was a fantastic book. On the whole, I really enjoyed this book, and I'm glad that I can now finally watch the film. I'm going to give this a 4 out of 5, but keep an eye out for my full video review, which should be up within the next week or 2, maybe. The next book I read was Prodigy by Marie Lu. Unfortunately, I can't wave this book in your face because I borrowed it from the library and it's already gone back. But in December I read Legend and absolutely loved it, so the next time I went to the library I had to get a copy of Prodigy, and I loved it perhaps even more than I love Legend. It was a brilliant book, and I can't wait to read Champion. I gave Prodigy by Marie Lu a 4.5 out of 5. The next book I read in January is Before I Fall by Lauren Oliver. I'm going to be honest and tell you that I picked it up just because the author is Lauren Oliver and I love Delirium. It's a brilliant book which looks at how somebody's character can change, and how I think it's kind of got a message that no matter who we are, we can all do good things, and perhaps we will sometimes say or do stupid things or mean things because we're kind of influenced by our friends and want to show off. I didn't like the character and I couldn't connect with her at the beginning of the book, but as her character begins to change, then you can sympathise with that and you can understand things more, and you realise that perhaps we're not all that different. It's a really interesting book. It's a bit of a Groundhog Day situation. A girl basically ends up reliving her last day and decides to change some things. I really recommend this book, especially if you read other things Lauren Oliver's written, or you like contemporary young adult. It's a fantastic book, and I gave it 4 out of 5. This next one's a bit tricky because I didn't read it, but it's an audio book, so it kind of fits in. And that's Percy Jackson and the Lightning Thief by Rick Riordan. I'm a little bit ashamed to admit that I started listening to this back in December, but because the only chance I really get to listen to something is in the car, and it takes me like 10 minutes to get to and from work, so it's taken me a long time to get through it. But I really enjoyed it, and I could definitely draw some parallels between Percy Jackson and Harry Potter so far. And I'm really hoping that as the series goes on, like Harry Potter, Percy gets older and the books get a bit darker. I don't know how many more books there are in the series, but there's quite a few. But at times I found myself wondering whether Percy, Grover and Annabeth would get out of situations. And I think an author's incredibly talented if they can make you concerned about a character that you know will survive for 4, 5, 6 more books yet. I really enjoyed Percy Jackson, and I gave it a 4 out of 5. The next book I read is Sherlock Holmes, The Hand of the Baskervilles by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. I've watched the TV series, I've seen some of the films, but I've never actually read a Sherlock book, so I decided it was time to give it a go. And although I really enjoyed the story, I struggle with the way it was written because I think it was written in 1901, so the words are completely different, and I read very new books. I struggle to read classics, and I don't really read old books, so I really struggled with this. I think if I'd read more classics or more books written around this time, I wouldn't have struggled so much, but I did, and that kind of ruined the story for me. Another thing was that at points I struggled to tell who was talking, and I found myself kind of disengaging from the book while I tried to figure out what was going on, and it didn't make for a smooth reading process for me, but I did enjoy the story. I'm not going to say I'll never read a Sherlock book again, because perhaps I will at some other point, but for now I can't see me picking it up within the next couple of years. Unfortunately, because of the writing and the trouble I had trying to figure out who was talking, I can only give this a 2 out of 5. You might think it's weird that all of a sudden I'm wearing different clothes and the lighting's a little bit different. You'd be right. Basically what happened was I filmed this in 2 parts and the second part got corrupted, so I've got to do it again. This is probably like my 4th attempt at filming this video. It has been a bit of a disaster so far. So where was I? I was talking about the last book I read in January, which was an ebook I received a copy of from NetGalley in exchange for an honest review, and that's The Forever Watch by David Ramirez. I've never read a proper space book, as I suppose you'd call it, and The Forever Watch really didn't let me down. The plot was very exciting, gripping, and quite complex and very clever. The characters were all really well built, and I think what I enjoyed most about the book was that when you look back, once you finished it, when you look back at the start and you see how far the characters come and exactly what's happened, and it seems like such a huge amount's happened and the author's crammed it all into, I think it was 366 pages, but never did it feel rushed or slow in parts. Overall, I really enjoyed it. The Forever Watch by David Ramirez isn't out until April the 22nd, I think. I know I've only read 8 books this year, but that is probably one of the best books I've read so far this year. Second probably only to Prodigy. I gave The Forever Watch by David Ramirez 4 out of 5. On to my February to be read list. The first book in my February to be read list is Queen of Nowhere by Jane Fenn. This was featured in I think it was my second library haul video, and as you can see I've started it but I've not got very far through it. I've not really found myself completely hooked yet, and I will admit I started reading another book which is more exciting than this, so I don't know whether I'll go back to it. It's due in at the library on Saturday, so I'm kind of in 2 minds as to whether to renew it. I probably will because I want to persevere with it. The next book I'm going to talk about is the one that's dragging me away from Queen of Nowhere, and that's another book that I've received an advance copy of from NetGalley in exchange for an honest review, and that's Forbidden by Laurie Adams. I've read 9 chapters so far and I'm really hooked. It's tough from the point of view of 3 completely different people, and I'm not going to say too much because when you read this you will understand why they're completely different. But 9 chapters in, I'm definitely drawing a lot of parallels between the main characters Sophie and Michael with Bella and Edward at the beginning of the Twilight series, which isn't such a bad thing because I like that series. Next on my list is Uglies by Scott Westerfeld. This has been on my to be read list for absolutely ages now, to the point where I've kind of forgotten where it's about, other than I think it's 16 you become pretty or something. I'm not sure. I've heard a lot of good things about Scott Westerfeld and this series, so I can't wait to finally dig in and give it a go. The next book is Eleanor and Park by Rainbow Rowell. For the Read and Ramble book club, our February options were Eleanor and Park by Rainbow Rowell or Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep by Philip K. Dick, I think it is. I chose Eleanor and Park, obviously, but I think if I've got time, I'll give Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep a go as well because that sounds really exciting. That's pretty much it. I was going to add The Guard by Kira Cass to this list because it came out yesterday on February the 4th, but when I went to download it from amazon.co.uk, I realised that it apparently doesn't come out in the UK until sometime in March, which kind of annoyed me because I was really looking forward to that, but that's probably my own fault for not checking when it's out in the UK. Oh well, a little bit annoyed about that. That's my January roundup and my February to be read list all done. That's my January roundup and my February to be read list all done. Let me know if you're reading any of these and what your thoughts are on them, or what you're reading this month. That'd be great to know. If you're interested in more book ramblings, please hit the subscribe button wherever it is. I don't know why I went funny then, but there we go. Thanks for watching, hope you enjoyed it. Until next time, bye! I gave And We Stay by Jenny Hubbard that's not 3. I gave Legend a 3.5 out of 5. Nope.